Welcome to Cyber Certified. Today we are undertaking a deep dive into, well, really the foundation of so much modern architecture, cloud service models and cloud deployment models. Our mission for you listening is to try and cut through some of that jargon, maybe deliver some clarity and actionable knowledge on these core concepts, because honestly, understanding the difference is just crucial for security, for cost control, everything.
Yeah, it really is. And what's fascinating, I find, is that even, experienced teams can sometimes get these two categories mixed up. So let's maybe hit that aha moment right up front. Yeah.
Yeah.
The key distinction is, well, pretty simple when you boil it down. Service models, think IA, PaaS, SaaS, they define what you're actually buying and, really importantly, who controls what.
Right, the responsibility.
Exactly. Then the deployment models, public, private, hybrid, community, they define where those resources are. It physically hosted and managed, location and ownership, basically.
Okay, perfect. So let's unpack the service models first then. I like thinking of that progression. IaaS, PaaS, SaaS is like a responsibility scale. You're looking at that critical line, right?
Yeah.
Where your team's duties end and the providers begin.
Precisely. So IaaS, infrastructure as a service. This gives you the maximum control. You're essentially renting the fundamental building blocks, compute, storage, basic networking. But that control, it comes with the highest maintenance burden. You, the user, are completely responsible for the operating systems, the middleware, the application itself, all of it.
So, okay, if you're migrating, say, traditional infrastructure, IaaS sounds great for flexibility. But the security risk is huge then, because like you said, the organization controls the operating systems and network security configurations. A missed patch, an open port on your OS, that's entirely your problem, your operational headache. High risk, high reward, I guess.
That sums it up pretty well. High risk, high reward. Now, moving along that scale to pay as platform as a service, here, the provider handles that, let's say, tricky OS layer and the runtime environment. So developers can just deploy their apps without managing the underlying servers or, worrying constantly about OS updates.
So it abstracts the infrastructure away, lets the team focus purely on code and data.
Exactly.
That speed, that reduced complexity. I can see that being a massive pull for dev teams, but I think that's where the risk shifts, right? If the provider manages the OS, you suddenly have limited visibility into that layer.
Yeah.
Maybe for custom security tooling or deep troubleshooting.
That's a definite trade-off. Limited visibility, absolutely.
Oh, yeah,
Frankly, PaaS can be notorious for vendor lock-in. Moving your nicely tuned application logic from one PaaS provider to another can be, well, punitive is a good word for it, difficult and costly.
Okay. And then we get to the end of that scale, SaaS, software as a service.
Mm-hmm. This is where users access an application pretty much entirely through a web browser. Think email, CRM tools, that sort of thing. It's the fastest deployment model, definitely the least amount of management required from your end. You basically manage user access and, well, the data you put into it.
But the trade-off there is dependence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Total dependence almost. Your
Nope.
data security, your compliance, it depends so heavily on the provider. You have to be incredibly meticulous about vetting their controls, their certifications. You've essentially handed over almost all the operational security responsibility.
You really have. So, okay, we've established who controls the stack with the service models. Now we need to bridge that gap. The next critical layer is where that stack lives and who owns it, those deployment models.
Yeah, this feels like a fundamentally different question. We're moving from operational control to ownership and residency. The simplest case is probably the public cloud. Shared resources, multiple tenants, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, the big names.
Right. Resources shared among multiple customers. The big advantage there is scalability and cost efficiency because you're sharing the underlying hardware costs.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Then you have the opposite, private cloud. Infrastructure dedicated solely to one organization.
Exactly. It could be on your own premises or hosted externally by a third party, but the key is that the resources are dedicated just to you, one organization. You get potentially higher control, maybe easier regulatory compliance for some things, but you often lose those big scale and cost benefits of the public model. It's usually more expensive.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Hybrid cloud, the blend.
The mix and match approach.
Using both public and private environments, letting applications sort of talk to each other across them. A really common example, you hear this a lot, is keeping sensitive customer data on-prem in the private cloud part.
Yeah.
But using a public cloud provider like AWS for the application hosting, maybe the web front ends that face the internet.
Yeah, the purpose there is clearly trying to balance that flexibility of public cloud with the control of private. Best of both worlds, supposedly. But And this is a big but. This arrangement introduces huge complexity, massive. You now have to manage and crucially secure the data flow and the network links between two fundamentally different environments. That integration piece, it's a significant operational challenge.
Definitely sounds complex.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, there's one more. Community cloud. This one feels a bit overlooked sometimes, but seems critical for certain industries with shared needs, right?
Absolutely. It's infrastructure that's shared, but only by organizations with common requirements or goals. Think common compliance needs, maybe specific government agencies or healthcare providers needing a pay compliance across the board. It's shared by organizations with those specific common needs.
So it's not public, but not strictly private either.
Yeah.
It's shared by a specific group. Governance complexity sounds like it could be a risk there, managing rules for a whole community.
That's definitely a factor. Governance across multiple organizations is never simple.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what does this mean for you, the listener? I think the core takeaway, synthesizing all this, is that when you're looking at any cloud tech, you really have to answer two separate questions. First, how much do I control? That's your service model question.
Right. IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS.
And second, how widely is this thing shared? That's your deployment model question.
Public, private, hybrid community. Spot on. And maybe this raises an important final thought for you to consider. When you're weighing your risks, how does the potential security nightmare of IaaS, which often comes from your own team's misconfiguration, let's be honest, how does that compare to the sort of inherent external risk of SaaS, which is that total dependency on your provider's security posture?
That's a really good point to chew on. Internal mistakes versus external dependencies. Food for thought. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel.